Who are you? A three-worded question that seems so simple, but is so hard to answer. Finding a sense of identity has to be one of the most confusing, complex, and even hard journeys that every single person has to go on. Even if that journey involves stealing girls' panties, destroying school classrooms, and causing absolute havoc. No Hana is not only one of the most bizarre and uncomfortable coming-of-age story, but also by far one of the best written pieces of media that I have ever seen. We open No Hana by meeting our two main characters. First, Takeo Kasuga, a young boy in middle school who is a real book nerd. He has a crush on the most popular girl in his class and really is just a normal kid. While the other main character is the complete opposite. Nakamura Sawa, a complete outcast of the rest of her peers, and is not afraid to treat people with disrespect and speak very openly about what she's thinking. The best way to describe Nakamura is that she's very, very strange. At first, the dynamic between Nakamura and Kasuga is nothing more than classmates, strangers, you could say really. But everything changes when one day after class, Kasuga is walking back from school when he realizes he forgot something. So he decides to run back to school and get his belongings. And when he gets there, he sees Saki's gym bag and her gym clothes in it. By the way, Saki is the popular girl that I just mentioned, aka Kasuga's crush. With Kasuga being a horny ass teenager, and also the fact that it's after school, so legit no one is there, we see his temptation and intrusive thoughts win him over, and he decides to instinctively steal his crush's gym clothes. He takes it home, and that night he smells it and does many more disturbing and weird things with Saki's gym clothes. The next day, when Kasuga gets to class, everyone learns about Saki's stolen gym clothes, with no one having any idea that Kasuga was the one to do the crime. He gets away with it, or so he thinks, as later on that day he runs into Nakamura, with her talking to Kasuga like he's her friend, asking him about if he likes to read books and what books he does read and if they're any good. And Kasuga is just shocked because, one, Nakamura has legit never spoken a word to Kasuga up until this point, and two, Nakamura is known by all of her peers and classmates, including Kasuga, of course, to be very strange and just different. Honestly, kind of like an alien compared to everyone else. It gets to the point where Nakamura just straight up hops on the back of Kasuga's bike and demands him to take her past this big, huge mountain that is just past their town. And Kasuga is like, hell no, you're freaking strange. I don't know you. Why would I take you all the way to this mountain? Like, that just doesn't make sense. Then Nakamura drops a bombshell by telling Kasuga that he saw her steal Saki's gym clothes. When Kasuga stole the clothes, Nakamura was hiding in the classroom. Of course, she saw Kasuga take the gym clothes, and Kasuga had no idea that she was there at the time. Nakamura, using this opportunity because she now has dirt on Kasuga, is like, hey, if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm going to expose you. I'm going to tell everyone in our class about how you stole Saki's gym clothes. Kasuga, being absolutely terrified and shocked by just all the information that he is learning, decides to just run away without even saying a single word to Nakamura. And you would think that the next day, Nakamura would go and expose Kasuga, but she actually doesn't do that. She's just not that type of person. She likes to have fun. So she decides to meet up with Kasuga again. This time with Kasuga actually talking to her. Nakamura tells Kasuga that his secret is safe with her, as long as they make a contract. And of course, this contract is exactly what it sounds like. Kasuga has to do whatever Nakamura wants him to do, or else she's just gonna, tell everyone about his secret. And before Kasuga can even respond and agree to this contract with Nakamura, we see Saki appear out of nowhere. Nakamura is already getting started when it comes to toying with Kasuga, as just before she met up with Kasuga, she told Saki that Kasuga needed to talk to her in the library later after school. And of course, that's why Saki is here. So Kasuga has absolutely nothing to do with Saki showing up here. So when Saki shows up and asks Kasuga like, hey, what do you need to talk to me about? He just embarrasses himself with him not even being able to talk, mutter a single word or sound for that matter. The man has been so overwhelmed with everything that has happened to him the past couple of days, and now he has to unexpectedly talk to his damn crush. Like, this is a 14-year-old kid who praises and worships this girl, right? So it makes sense why he's acting the way he is. Nakamura decides to take things into her own hands by pushing Kasuga right into Saki's chest, making this whole interaction very awkward and perverted. Saki ends up running away embarrassed, and of course, Kasuga probably just experienced the most embarrassing moment of his whole entire life, while Nakamura just finds it amusing and funny. That's really why Nakamura is doing this, because she just finds it really entertaining and fun to mess with Kasuga. But as we get more and more into the story, we find out that Nakamura's motivations for forming this contract with Kasuga become very deep and complex. After this encounter between Saki, Kasuga, and Nakamura demands that her and Kasuga hang out every single day. And while Kasuga is hanging out and keeping Nakamura busy, he somehow just gets blessed with this freaking miracle by getting a natural friendship with Saki somehow. Saki and Kasuga become really good friends, eventually leading to Kasuga even taking her out on a date. And when Nakamura hears about all of this stuff, she's like, great, because in her mind, it's another opportunity to just fuck around with Kasuga and get some more entertainment out of him. When the day finally comes that Kasuga is going to take Saki on a date, Nakamura purposely meets up with Kasuga 30 minutes before his date and makes him put on Saki's gym clothes underneath his own normal clothes. And Kasuga is just super perplexed by this request, because what entertainment does Nakamura get out of this? Kasuga will be very uncomfortable and embarrassed for a majority of this date, but he eventually gets used to wearing Saki's clothes, and it doesn't ruin his date with Saki at all. And actually, he has a really good damn date with her. So how could this be some entertainment for Nakamura? Like, how is this entertaining to just watch this normal, mundane, boring date? Well, this is where we get into Nakamura's second big main motivation for forming this contract or controlling Kasuga. Perversion, the alteration of something from its original course, meaning, or state to a distortion of corruption of what it was first intended to be. This perfectly describes Nakamura's view on other people. Nakamura believes that all human beings wear these masks. They cover up who they really are with lies. They all fit into these bullshit social norms, social stereotypes, and try to live their lives successful citizens in society and pretending to be people that they really aren't. So when Nakamura saw Kasuga pick up Saki's gym clothes, she realized like, hey, this guy's a pervert. This guy is very strange and weird. So she became obsessed with slowly but surely exposing Kasuga in her own twisted ways by exposing him as this dirty, perverted man. This leads into the date that he has with Saki, as Nakamura along the way demands him to do dirty and perverted things to Saki, with the big demand from Nakamura being that Kasuga kiss Saki. But Kasuga's like, hell no, I'm not doing this, and finally decides to stand up to Nakamura, as he just comes out and asks Saki if she wants to be in a pure platonic relationship with him, and she says yes, which this spoils Nakamura's plan to show Kasuga for who he really is on this date. And going back to the kiss, even though a kiss is not a big deal, like this is a simple kiss we're talking about, kissing someone or making out with someone is usually the trigger for going into more sexual things, if you get what I'm getting at here. So I personally think that Nakamura was hoping by having Kasuga kiss Saki, they would go into doing more perverted, dirty sexual actions. But as I mentioned, that doesn't happen, and Kasuga just completely shuts down Nakamura's plans. Nakamura gets pissed by her plans being ruined and her fun being spoiled. So she sneaks up behind Kasuga while he is talking to Saki, and they're having this great conversation, and she pours a bucket of water on him. And with the water soaking into Kasuga's clothes, they basically become transparent and show what's underneath, aka Saki's gym clothes. Saki then straight up sees Kasuga wearing her clothes, and then he ends up getting scared and runs off, trying to convince himself that Saki didn't see him wearing her own gym clothes. Kasuga runs into Nakamura right after and starts going off about how evil she is, and Nakamura looks Kasuga dead straight in the eyes and is like, you are a traitor. How could you ask Saki for this platonic, pure, loving relationship like you're some normal person, some normal kid? Kasuga defends himself and is like, I am a normal person. I'm not this pervert that you think I am. I'm a perfectly normal, moral dude. Nakamura, just having no care in the world for what Kasuga is saying to her, keeps calling him a yucky pervert, a dirty, perverted man. Kasuga and Nakamura really do clash heads early on in this story. The next day, Kasuga turns up to class absolutely terrified by the idea that Saki's going to expose him. But instead, he gets exposed for just simply taking Saki on a date. And then Saki ends up telling the whole entire class that they are going out. So somehow Saki didn't see Kasuga wearing her own gym clothes, which I just called BS because like it was clear as day. You could see Saki's name just like in big fat black letters over Kasuga's chest. Like she definitely saw that. And I personally think that Saki just likes Kasuga so much that she's just like, I'm just gonna keep it a secret and just, you know, blow it off, get past it kind of thing. And moving forward, for the first time in the story, things are actually going super well for Kasuga. Saki is his girlfriend. He basically got away with stealing his own girlfriend's gym clothes. Kasuga still has to deal with Nakamura, of course, but surprisingly enough, Nakamura decides to just let Kasuga have a normal, healthy relationship with Saki, and she really doesn't interfere at all with it, with Saki and Nakamura even becoming good friends. But of course, with there being two girls and one guy, a very twisted, toxic love triangle starts to form. As even though Saki gets in this amazing relationship with Kasuga, the dynamic between Kasuga and Nakamura never really changes. With the two continuing to hang out every day, Kasuga spending more time with Nakamura than his own girlfriend. So cracks start to form in Saki and Kasuga's relationship, with Saki really starting to suspect that Kasuga is cheating on her with Nakamura, which is fair to be honest, as from the outside looking in, it really does seem that way. And even though things go really great for Kasuga for some time, things drastically start to just go old to shit, because he has to worry about school, keeping Saki happy and keeping their relationship functioning. He has to worry about keeping Nakamura happy. And even though he never got caught for stealing Saki's gym clothes, the guilt that he has for not confessing and really just doing that perverted action in the first place is killing him every single day. And it only gets worse with more time that he doesn't confess to his sins. So one day he just absolutely cracks and breaks down, with him begging to Nakamura one night to just tell Saki, their whole entire class, the truth about how he stole Saki's gym clothes, as he simply doesn't have the balls to confess himself. Otherwise, he would have confessed to his crimes already and not be under Nakamura's control. Nakamura agrees, but of course she has to devise a plan to make this whole entire thing a big spectacle to be entertaining. So the next night, Nakamura and Kasuga sneak into their school, with Nakamura demanding that Kasuga confess to his crime and write everything in big white chalk on their classroom school board. How he stole Saki's gym clothes and sniffed and rubbed them all over himself. How he wore Saki's gym clothes while on a date with Saki herself. And how he's a total pervert, this dirty, disgusting, perverted man. That is what Nakamura demands that Kasuga write, while also leaving Saki's gym clothes right in the front of their classroom so that everyone can really see the proof that Kasuga really did do all the things that he said he did. He's like, what? I don't want to confess to all the other stuff. I just want to confess to stealing Saki's gym clothes. Because technically all the other stuff he did was because of Nakamura. So Nakamura and Kasuga get into another huge fight, with Kasuga just bawling his eyes out, saying that he just wants to be normal. He just wants to be a normal kid again. A flip then just switches Nakamura as she just says goodbye to Kasuga and says he's a shitter, a shitbug, a boring, normal person just like everyone else, and she wants nothing to do with him. And as Nakamura is walking out of the classroom, Kasuga calls out to her, begs for her to stay and help him, when he instinctively just starts writing down every single thing that Nakamura told him to write, with him going absolutely crazy, calling himself a shitbug pervert, And Nakamura is getting a absolute turn on by all of this and what Kasuga is doing. So it's pretty obvious at this point in the story, Kasuga has developed some type of romantic feelings for Nakamura to the point where he is afraid of losing her and is willing to do anything to keep her around. Nakamura and Kasuga both grab giant black paint and just start painting the whole entire classroom, throwing the desks and all the things in the classroom until the classroom is a complete total mess. Kasuga and Nakamura both experiencing one of the funniest nights of their lives. Nakamura got everything she wanted from Kasuga. He finally showed and admitted his true self to her while causing absolute havoc in the process, being the complete opposite of someone normal. And of course, Kasuga has already developed some romantic feelings for Nakamura at this point in the story, to the point where he's willing to do anything to just keep her around. The next day, when Kasuga gets to class expecting to be just screwed and finally found out for his crimes, Nakamura ended up erasing his name off the board that night and lied to the whole school, saying that she saw an old pervert sneaking around the school that night. So Nakamura and Kasuga both get away with their crimes. They meet up later that day talking about everything that happened, when suddenly, once again, Saki decides to just show up out of nowhere. And no, this is not like last time where Saki showed up because of Nakamura. Not the case at all. Nakamura nor Kasuga had any idea that Saki would just show up like this out of the blue this time. Kasuga instantly tells Saki that he wants to break up with her right when he runs into her again. And Saki starts to actually freak out, saying that she knows that Kasuga stole her gym clothes and messed up the whole entire classroom. Surprisingly enough though, she says to Kasuga that she would never break up with him because of the crimes that he's committed. So I was right about Saki seeing Kasuga wearing her gym clothes on their first date. She just decided to not say anything because she started developing real romantic feelings for Kasuga. Anyways, Saki tells Kasuga to think things over before she just storms off. Kasuga ends up becoming completely overwhelmed by his relationship with Saki and just with Saki in general, not understanding why Saki doesn't hate him, which honestly is fair because it's like, why would you still want to be with someone who did such perverted things to you, right? Because Kasuga believes at this point in the story that Saki just deserves someone better than him, that there's someone out there that is way better for Saki, which probably is the case to be fair. As well as Kasuga having stronger feelings for Nakamura than Saki, and it really has been this way for most of the story. He has always had stronger romantic feelings for Nakamura. So he simply just doesn't want to be with her anymore and hurt her even more than he already has. Kasuga misses multiple days of school, and before he can return back to school, his mom ends up finding his dirty clothes, the clothes that he was wearing on the night that him and Nakamura messed up their school classroom. So his mom is like, what is this? And she just starts losing her mind, and Kasuga just runs straight out of his house without even giving his mom an answer. He ends up running to a certain river where him and Nakamura usually hang out. This is their hangout spot. And when he reaches that river, of course, Nakamura is already there waiting for him. Kasuga catches Nakamura up to speed, and Nakamura demands that Kasuga take her over the mountain. The same mountain that we saw Nakamura talking about at the very beginning of the story. And the reason that Nakamura is so freaking obsessed with going to this mountain and going over this mountain is because to her, that's her escape. Her escape from this tiny little mundane town that she and Kasuga live in. Really just an escape from normalness and mediocrity. In Nakamura's own words, she calls it the other side. And her true goal is to reach this other side. And at this point in the story, Kasuga is really getting introduced to this whole other side concept and what it really is. With him also becoming just completely obsessed with Nakamura herself. This whole other side concept is basically just an escape. Because Kasuga has always wanted to get away from the town that he lives in. He's always thought that he was different from everyone else and honestly better in a sense. Like he deserved something better than to live in this mundane little small town, that he deserved to get away and live in some other type of world or place that was better. Kasuga and Nakamura make a trip past this huge mountain by biking because of course these characters are like 14, so they're not old enough to drive. So their trip lasts for hours. And to make things worse, the weather also ends up becoming very bad, with it just pouring outside. And because Nakamura and Kasuga are gone for so long, the police, Kasuga and Nakamura's parents, as well as even Saki, all get involved with the search for finding these two. Around halfway up the mountain, Nakamura and Kasuga decide to stop because the weather's just so damn bad that it's basically impossible for them to just keep going forward up the mountain. And this is where we finally see Kasuga agree with Nakamura for the first time in the story. And this is where we see Nakamura call Kasuga a pervert, but also herself one as well. And instead of trying to defend himself here, Kasuga actually says it feels good to be called a pervert for a change, and even thanks Nakamura for dragging him along this trip up this big mountain. This scene is where we really start to see our main character Kasuga finally start to get some character development, with him finally understanding what Nakamura meant by this whole other side concept and idea that she's always been talking about, starting to really understand her point of view on society and the world as a whole, with the two connecting for the first time in this story. But they get interrupted by none other than Saki, who is honestly just going so crazy over the fact that 1, Kasuga has been completely ignoring her for a couple of days now, and 2, he's with Nakamura of all people. And as I've already mentioned, Saki has suspected Kasuga to be cheating for quite some time now. So when she sees these two up on this mountain so close together talking, obviously she gets the wrong idea in her head. But even then, Saki just excuses all of Kasuga's actions and just gaslights herself, saying how everything is just her fault. And she literally just begs for Kasuga to just open up to her, to just tell her the truth about everything. In the background, Nakamura is hearing all this, and something just clicks inside of her, with Nakamura just ranting and spouting to Saki about who Kasuga really is, the type of person that he really is, with her also taking off all of his clothes in the process. When Saki sees Kasuga nude, instead of being disgusted or running away, she simply reaches out to Kasuga and defends him with her saying how all the crazy shit and perverted things he did was all for her sake, which is a crazy conclusion for someone to come to. But as I already mentioned, Saki is just fully gaslighting herself at this point, and also in the process is gaining this very unhealthy obsession with Kasuga. And speaking of unhealthy obsessions, Kasuga is starting to become fully obsessed with Nakamura. At first, when Saki reaches out to Kasuga and eventually ends up hugging him, she begs for him to come home with her instead of Nakamura. And with Kasuga seeing all these just crazy emotions coming from Saki, he folds and starts to apologize to her, basically agreeing to ditch this whole entire plan to go to the other side of this mountain with Nakamura and instead now go home with Saki. When Nakamura hears all of this, she's like, how boring and stupid, and decides that she's just gonna leave Kasuga behind. And right when Nakamura continues on without Kasuga up this mountain, Kasuga instinctively just charges towards Nakamura, kind of like how we see him do with the whole classroom thing a couple of chapters earlier, where he instinctively just does what Nakamura wants him to do. And when Kasuga reaches Nakamura, he's like, what am I doing? Because his body moved entirely off of instinct. It moved on its own. So even though Kasuga consciously decided that he wants to go with Saki and not Nakamura, subconsciously he's still choosing Nakamura. He still wants to go with her. Saki cries out to Kasuga, asking him, why do you always choose Nakamura over me? And before Kasuga can really respond to Saki, Nakamura butts in and just calls Saki lame, and the two start to clash heads and fight. Kasuga completely gets overwhelmed and stressed by everything going on, so he falls onto the ground screaming, with Kasuga bashing himself, saying how he was never different than anyone in this town, and he can't bring himself to choose Nakamura or Saki. Nakamura actually gets really upset with Kasuga saying all this, which is pretty surprising considering how we have seen multiple times in the story by now how Nakamura is willing to leave Kasuga at any point in time. She is not afraid to just completely just leave, walk away, and never talk to this dude ever again. But this time around, she's so upset that she's even crying, which really does show that Nakamura has developed a connection with Kasuga. Deep down, she does care about him, even though it really seems like she doesn't. The cops end up interrupting the group's argument, with them taking Saki, Kasuga, and Nakamura back into their town. So Nakamura and Kasuga never made it to the so-called other side. aka just the other side of this mountain. We then get our first time skip in the story with a month passing. Kasuga is not on speaking terms with Nakamura, and he has been completely ignoring Saki as well. So Saki just decides to break up with him. And the only thing that really has been on Kasuga's mind for the past month has been Nakamura, with Kasuga realizing that he deeply hurt Nakamura. That's why Nakamura lashed out on Kasuga on the mountain, because he lied to her. He said that he was willing to give up everything and go to this other side with her, but he backed out and never did. So he failed to keep his promise in the end. Kasuga gains this weird savior complex towards Nakamura, where he starts to believe that he is the only person who can truly connect with Nakamura. And if he doesn't fix things between them, then she will spend the rest of her life alone, because no one really understands her. Which, to be fair, one of the main things about Nakamura's character is how she's completely isolated. Her dad, her classmates, her teachers, Nakamura sees them all as shitbugs. Normies who blindly live pretend lives. And because of that, she of course isolates herself from every single person around her. Except for Kasuga, of course. Nakamura's only real connection that she has formed in her whole entire life has been with Kasuga. Kasuga attempts to rekindle his relationship with Nakamura, with him saying good morning to her when he gets to class and trying to engage in social little interactions here and there. He also decides to write an essay for Nakamura, which was one of the very first tasks at the start of the story that Nakamura demanded that Kasuga do, but he never did it. So he just thinks better late than never and decides to write the essay now, and he goes all out with this essay. But once again, Nakamura just completely ignores him and just doesn't really care. Kasuga realizes that he's gonna have to do something really big for Nakamura to truly notice him. Kasuga starts by building a structure or fort right by the river that him and Nakamura always hang out by. And Kasuga's reasoning for building this structure is because he wants to create the other side. Because Nakamura and Kasuga failed to reach the so-called other side by not reaching the very top of that big mountain, he just decides he's just gonna create the other side, right dab in the middle of Nakamura and Kasuga's town. With the finishing touch to this fort being all the girls' panties and underwear hanging up and covering every single inch of this fort. Yes, I am not joking. But before I get into that, let's rewind a bit. So, Kasuga, knowing he has to do something big to get Nakamura's attention, sneaks into the girls' locker room while everyone is out swimming for gym class. And that's when he sneaks in, steals the girls' panties, goes back to his fort, and then, of course, he puts all the panties on strings and hangs them all up around the fort, with the so-called other side being full of his classmates' panties. As I already mentioned, the whole other side concept is all about showing your true self. Whether that be perverted or crazy or mentally insane, the true concept is just to be different, to drop the mask that everyone puts on to fit into the rest of society and make you feel safe to show who you really are as a person. So the girls' panties make this fort have this concept of the so-called other side, because it's automatically different and isolated from everywhere else. So this fort, full of girls' panties, is a place of liberation. You know what's actually just nuts? How stealing panties could have such a deep and complex meaning. Because the story's so weird, but behind all the weirdness, there's just so much deep complexity, a beautiful masterpiece writing. Anyway, Kasuga shows Nakamura this fort, aka the other side. And let's just say that Kasuga's plan to get Nakamura's attention definitely worked, as Nakamura is just totally impressed, with Kasuga entering another contract with her. Which I didn't mention this earlier, but this was Kasuga's really true motivation for getting Nakamura's attention, to get into another contract, that way he would always be with Nakamura. Some time passes, with Kasuga and Nakamura going back to doing their perverted pranks and shenanigans, like putting a pair of panties on a statue's head at their school, and really just continuing to mess with everyone at their school and everyone that lives in this small little town. Nakamura and Kasuga are having the time of their lives. They are also connecting like crazy, with Nakamura and Kasuga getting along like they have been best friends their whole entire life, with their relationship finally becoming a little bit romantic at this point in the story. Like, there's always been this romantic tension between these two, with it being obvious that Kasuga has developed romantic feelings for Nakamura, and Nakamura has developed some for him as well. She's really starting to get very touchy with him now, and she's constantly blushing whenever she's talking to him. And it's pretty clear now that at this point in the story, Nakamura has developed romantic feelings for Kasuga. Moving aside from Kasuga and Nakamura, Saki has started to go detective mode, because she found out much earlier in the story about how Nakamura and Kasuga were behind everything. The trash classroom, the stealing panties, everything. So naturally, when all this strange stuff starts happening again, Saki suspects Nakamura and Kasuga right off the bat. So she ended up getting help from her best friend Ai, who is kind of like Saki's right-hand man. And all you need to know about Ai is that she's a pretty annoying character who doesn't really need to be in the story in my opinion, but she's just kind of there. Saki stalks Kasuga and even finds the other side fort, with her just being disgusted by what it actually is. But Saki and I never once go to the police or the school principal or anyone for that matter, which really doesn't make any sense. With I pointing out to Saki multiple times, like, hey, this is pretty much illegal, we should go to some type of adult. But Saki is still obsessed with Kasuga. Even though she broke up with him, she still has very strong romantic feelings for him. So she says no every single time that Ai brings it up and just tells Ai to just be quiet. And the reason that she just decides to stalk these two instead of going to the police about their activities is because of two reasons. One is the main one, with Saki still being in love with Kasuga and not being able to bring herself to rat him out. And two, Saki is more worried about Nakamura and Kasuga's relationship than she is any of the crazy stuff they're doing. Like, she knows it's all wrong, but she still prioritizes her worries about stuff like Kasuga being in love with Nakamura, or if they are officially a couple yet. Stuff like that is what really worries Saki, and that's her main motivation for stalking these two. Nakamura and Kasuga just continue on to go and live their lives, with summer break just around the corner. Kasuga and Nakamura decide they need to go bigger than ever before for summer break. The town they live in has a summer festival every year, and it's at this summer festival that Kasuga and Nakamura decide that they want to get pieces of plywood, nail all the panties that Kasuga stole earlier to the plywood, and hang them up all around the town during the festival. That way, the whole town, everyone in this town, is going to be forced to leave the world of normacy for a bit and enter the so-called other side. So Nakamura and Kasuga are basically expanding this other side concept from this tiny little fort, this structure they built, into their whole entire town. After stalking Kasuga for quite some time, Saki finally gets in a fight with Ai, where Ai has just had enough and exposes Saki for her real reasons for not going to the police or the school. And this causes Saki to just blow up in Ai's face and crash out. Saki decides to try one last time, one last-ditch effort to win Kasuga over. Saki one day calls Kasuga's family phone, saying that his fort and all of his things by the river are on fire. Kasuga instantly hangs up the phone and gets to the fort as quickly as possible, to simply find Saki sitting inside. So of course, she lied about the fire to get Kasuga to rush over to her as fast as possible. Saki asks Kasuga if him and Nakamura have had sex yet, and before Kasuga can even say a single word, Saki is already in the process of taking off her clothes. Saki then asks Kasuga straight up if he wants to have sex with her. And Kasuga, during this whole entire situation, is like, what the hell is going on? He tries to escape the fort, but Saki gets a hold of him, and he just freezes, in shock, just stunned by what Saki is doing right now. Saki begs Kasuga to go out with her again, and how Saki will forget about everything that Kasuga has done with Nakamura, and all the crazy crimes that he has committed. But Kasuga keeps resisting with all of his might, because his heart's already taken. It's taken by Nakamura. And also at the same time, he doesn't want to hurt Saki even more than he already has. It gets to the point where Saki is just fully nude. and forcefully puts Kasuga's hand on her boob. And somehow my man just keeps pushing Saki away. It's kind of crazy how he has so much just determination to run away from Saki right now, especially considering how she's fully nude and offering herself to Kasuga, when at the start of the story, this man folded for some gym clothes, my guy. Saki then starts to mock Nakamura and her and Kasuga's idea of this whole entire other side by saying it's silly, with her also looking down on Kasuga as well, saying that he can't live without Nakamura, that he's leaning on her. Which is pretty ironic because Saki's legit doing the same with Kasuga right now. And you could argue that her obsession with Kasuga is arguably worse than Kasuga's obsession with Nakamura. Saki forces a kiss with Kasuga, and even though Kasuga is still trying to resist, things just get so intense that he just completely freezes, which allows for Saki to put Kasuga's thing inside of her. So they both experience penetration for a couple of seconds, before Kasuga finally gets Saki off him and just says to her, "I love Nakamura," then just walking out of the fort, leaving Saki behind. Which, oh my, this has to be the most disturbing scene in this story, in my opinion. The fact that we basically just saw Kasuga get raped while Saki is just breaking down mentally is such a uncomfortable scene to read, and especially explain to all of you. Which brings me to the author of this story, Shuzo Oshimi, who does a great job at portraying just how wrong all of this really is and how uncomfortable it really is. The man really does know how to make his readers uncomfortable. As Kasuga is walking away from the fort, processing what the hell just happened to him, Saki lights the fort on fire, destroying everything. All of Nakamura and Kasuga's plans are now ruined. Right after, Nakamura ends up running into Kasuga, asking what happened, with Kasuga just being so destroyed and in shock by all of this happening so quickly that he can't even say a single word to her. Saki then shows up out of nowhere once again, telling Nakamura how her and Kasuga did the deed, and how she was the one to destroy all of her stuff and her plans. Nakamura laughs it off, and this causes Saki to have another crash out. And how does Nakamura respond to all of this? By simply hugging Saki. Saki begins to break down, weeping about how she wishes that she was Nakamura. Because Nakamura has the one thing that Saki doesn't. The one thing that Saki desires most in this world, Kasuga's love. Saki has always been jealous and thought that Nakamura was better than her simply because she was able to make Kasuga fall in love with her when Saki couldn't do that. No matter how hard she tried, she just could never persuade Kasuga to pick her over Nakamura. It's safe to say that Saki's obsession with Kasuga completely destroyed her. And I myself personally do not like Saki as a character, but damn is she just so well written. And just a really good representation of how really unhealthy obsessions can completely destroy you and your whole entire life. Kasuga and Nakamura end up leaving the scene before the cops and firefighters arrive. Kasuga says to Nakamura that everything is going to be okay. This is only a minor setback. They still have time to redo things. Nakamura simply responds to all of this by saying that everything is over, because if these two continue doing everything that they have been doing, then it will lead to death. Nakamura doesn't want to die, and decides that the contract between her and Kasuga is officially over. Now, what exactly did Nakamura mean by all of this death stuff she's talking about? Because obviously she didn't mean in a physical sense. Like Kasuga and Nakamura both physically die and their bodies get put in the ground and they rot. Nothing like that. What Nakamura means here is that if they continue to keep doing their crimes, upping the ante more and more each time, then they will eventually get caught and face the consequences for their actions. Now, of course, these two are way too young to go to jail, but they definitely would get put into like a juvenile detention center or something of that nature. And to Nakamura, that basically is like death. Losing her freedom and being made to live a certain way, to be a certain person, just isn't who she is. That goes against all of her beliefs, her ideas, her perspectives, everything. That's why she decides to end things with Kasuga here. Because I'm sure that the summer festival plan was the most that Nakamura was willing to do and the farthest that she was willing to go. I don't think that's the only reason why she's cutting things off with Kasuga so suddenly like this. I think everything that Saki said to Nakamura right after the fire really affected Nakamura and just made it so that she really just didn't want to talk to Kasuga anymore. Because even though it seemed like Nakamura wasn't affected at all by learning about the fact that Saki and Kasuga technically did the deed and kissed, it has been very established now that Nakamura does have romantic feelings for Kasuga, and this is a recurring pattern in her character. She doesn't really show her emotions, especially towards Kasuga. Kasuga hits rock bottom once again. He starts to lose his mind because Nakamura has completely cut contact with him. His parents also end up finding out about everything, the fort full of panties, Kasuga and Nakamura's big plan for the summer festival, and because of this he gets grounded and cannot leave his house at all. One day Saki ends up coming to Kasuga's house, which holy, that is ballsy. She also has a appearance change by cutting her hair really short, and I wonder why she would do this. I wonder who she's trying to be here. Anyway, this time around though, things are different, with Saki apologizing about everything that happened. Also trying to convince Kasuga to turn himself in because he's lost Nakamura, and there's really nothing else for him to do except for just face his sins head on. Saki starts to take small jabs at Nakamura once again, and this causes Kasuga to lash out, with Saki leaving Kasuga's house, sobbing her eyes out and apologizing one more time. It truly is just so sad how the relationship between these two turned out. Saki then turns herself into the police, and she tells the police everything, from Nakamura and Kasuga being the ones responsible for trashing their school classroom, to Kasuga stealing all the girls' panties, and of course confessing to her own crimes. With everyone in the town now knowing that Nakamura and Kasuga have been behind all the perverted crimes that have been happening in their town, Kasuga's parents decide that they will be moving far away, along with Nakamura's family also deciding the same thing. Later that night, Nakamura ends up breaking into Kasuga's house with a baseball bat. Kasuga and Nakamura end up running off, with Nakamura even landing a nasty blow to Kasuga's dad's leg when the dad tries to stop them, and sending that grown man to the goddamn hospital in the process. Nakamura takes Kasuga to a abandoned building and demands Kasuga to go fully nude. She starts acting batshit crazy, telling Kasuga that she's going to peel off all of his skin, and starts scratching him with her nails, as well as threatening him with the bat, even almost bashing Kasuga's head in. Nakamura rants on to Kasuga about how there's really no other side, no shit bugs, nothing at all. She then says, no matter where I go, I can't get rid of me. Wow, a huge reveal for Nakamura's character. And Nakamura finally admitted something about herself, her self-view. This scene honestly reminds me of when Arthur talks to Sister Cauldron in Red Dead Redemption 2. When we finally see him drop his tough guy act and admit that he's afraid to die. Same thing with Nakamura. She finally opens up about how she just despises herself, how she feels so isolated and alone. The whole point of Nakamura's character is escapism. Because Nakamura is so different and pretty much alien-like compared to every other single person around her, she's completely alone. That's why she develops this whole entire other side concept in this world view. It's honestly because she just wants to escape the world that she lives in. With Nakamura having so many failed attempts of really creating or reaching the so-called other side, she realized in the process that there really is no such thing as the other side. There is no place for her where she belongs, sadly. She demands Kasuga to bash her brains in because she hates herself so much that she would rather die than be forced to keep living in this world. Of course, Kasuga doesn't do this, and instead just hugs her so freaking tightly, with Nakamura asking Kasuga if he will ditch his whole entire future with her, and he simply just agrees. So just like that, these two are planning to off themselves. And of course, they have to do it in the most bizarre, flamboyant way. They strike at the summer festival. Now, they're not doing their original plan that they had before, but this time what they decide to do is go up on this huge stage where everyone can see them. They pour gasoline on themselves, they both grip a lighter while singing a song about how this town and world is living hell, and calling everyone shitbugs as well as themselves. As they are getting ready to light themselves on fire, Kasuga starts to have some doubts and question if he's really doing the right thing. And Nakamura can just tell that he is having doubts and he is ultimately scared of going through with this plan. So she pushes him off the stage and tells him goodbye, that she is going solo. Nakamura pushed Kasuga off the stage here because as he was having doubts, Nakamura was also realizing that she wasn't like him at all. Even after everything they went through together, even with Nakamura trying her best to make Kasuga just like her so she wouldn't be alone anymore. In the end, it just was all pointless because Kasuga just wasn't Nakamura. Before Nakamura can light herself on fire, her dad swoops in and tackles her to the ground, stopping Nakamura from completing her final wish. We then get a sudden time skip where 3 years have passed. Kasuga is now 17 and in high school, which finally brings us into Act 2 of the story, which holy shit, I did not expect the video to be this damn long. Kasuga's life has completely changed. He has a new group of friends, he's fitting in at school, his relationship with his parents seem to be good, and his life in general just seems to be normal now. And even though his life is pretty stable, he's still very empty. He's living without purpose or motivation. He's really just existing for the sake of existing. But everything changes when on a random night, he meets Aya Takawa at a small bookstore. Aya is the popular girl. She's super friendly, everyone likes her, and she's very attractive and definitely has her way with the guys. So when Kasuga sees Aya at this very small random bookstore in Tokyo, he's pretty surprised. And not only that, she's also looking at the Flower of Evil book, which of course is the English title of this manga. But Kasuga at the start of the story used to carry around a copy of the Flower of Evil's novel with him everywhere. So Kasuga and Aya start talking about the Flowers of Evil novel, with Aya asking Kasuga if he likes to read, and this re-sparks something within him. I didn't really cover this part of Kasuga's character a whole lot earlier in the video, but when the story first started, Kasuga was a huge book nerd. This was his passion, his life, you could even say. But later on in Act 1, mainly when he meets Nakamura, he just completely stops reading altogether because he becomes so obsessed and consumed with Nakamura and their pervy shenanigans that he loses himself and pretty much every single thing he was interested in the process. Aya says she can lend Kasuga some of her books, and he agrees, with this being the beginning of their friendship, along with Kasuga finally feeling some joy in his life again. Aya lends Kasuga 2 of her own books, with it only taking Kasuga 1 night to read both of the books. And these were like some lengthy ass books as well. And this just keeps going on and on, where Aya lends Kasuga books and he reads them like almost instantly every single day, building up their friendship in the process. And this is the first real connection that Kasuga has made with another human being since Nakamura. As he does have new friends now and gets along with people, he still is the outcast. Whenever his friends want to go and do stuff outside of school, Kasuga always declines, and he's always in the background of the group's conversations. Aya and Kasuga end up getting so close that Kasuga ends up going to Aya's house. And no, they do not do anything dirty. Get your mind out of the gutter. They simply just talk about books and their love for books, with Aya just having multiple bookshelves full of books. Kasuga is just amazed at how big and good her collection really is, and as he's looking through it, he finds this strange book called Plot, with Aya snatching it right out of his hands when he's about to look at it. She's too embarrassed and doesn't want to show Kasuga this certain book because this is her own book that she's currently writing. Aya is embarrassed by the fact that she likes books, even though she loves them so much to the point where she is writing her own books right now. Since she's so popular though and hangs out with all the other popular kids in her school and around her, she tends to just fit in and like whatever the other popular kids like, never really talking about or exploring her true interests with anyone. A perfect example of this is her boyfriend, Koji. Koji, a popular jock who all the ladies love. And speaking of Koji, he just ends up pulling to Aya's house while Kasuga is over. And Koji is pissed. And the reason he's so pissed is because Aya has never let Koji into her room and they have been dating for a full year. So for her to just let Kasuga in when they have barely been friends, but not let in her 1-year relationship boyfriend, it's just kind of crazy. Koji meets Kasuga and he's able to kind of tell that Kasuga is not the type to impose or do anything dirty with Aya, so he keeps his chill and keeps it together, even acting friendly to Kasuga. He even invites Kasuga to his little get-together Aya and him are currently going to, with Kasuga meeting all of Aya and Koji's close friends. At this get-together, Koji is low-key an asshole. Like, he treats Kasuga like he's a new friend he just met and tries to include him in the group's conversations and activities, but he subtly just jabs Kasuga here and there, with him just throwing kind of petty little insults at him, calling him strange, a little loser, things like that. Aya notices Koji's subtle language, eventually standing up for Kasuga, which causes the two to have a fight, and Aya just ends up storming off. And this is a huge turning point for Aya and Kasuga's relationship, showing us that Aya holds such a deep value for Kasuga because she can be her true self around him. She's never faked being someone else when she's with Kasuga. She's always displayed her true self when she's with him. A couple days later, after the get-together that Kasuga went to, Aya really starts to talk to Kasuga about her book. With the two one day going to a cafe, Aya shows him just the basic plans for her book, and he's completely amazed by her ideas and writing, with him really resonating with the story. When Aya and Kasuga leave the cafe and decide to go home, Kasuga just has to run into a familiar face, Saki, who looks much more mature and has her own boyfriend now. Surprisingly enough, Saki is actually very friendly to Kasuga, considering the history the two have. Saki even asks to exchange numbers with Kasuga, legit texting him later that day asking him if he wants to get lunch with her. So she's really just acting like nothing, absolutely nothing happened between them. They end up getting lunch, and at first, the two just catch up. Simple small talk, with Saki still being very friendly towards Kasuga, which just gave me this super eerie feeling while I was reading this, because for her to be acting this way, all friendly and nice towards the guy who basically ruined her life in a sense, it just doesn't make sense. Saki then brings up Nakamura, asking why Nakamura pushed Kasuga off the stage. And this completely changes the entire tone of their conversation, with Saki completely switching her mood as well. After Kasuga tells Saki that he really just doesn't know anything about Nakamura or why she pushed him, Saki then goes on to ask about this new girl, Aya, with her being convinced that Aya is just a stand-in for Nakamura. And this really hits a nerve in Kasuga, with him just instantly denying it and shutting the idea down, with him saying that she's just a really good friend and that he just really is excited about reading her novel. It's the first real meaningful thing that he has had or is looking forward to in 3 years. Saki just calls him a liar, asking if he's gonna make her unhappy too, which once again just sends a shiver down Kasuga's spine, as that was the thing that Saki consistently said to Kasuga over and over and over again during Act 1. Kasuga starts to get very heated, with Saki ranting about how Kasuga has been running away from Nakamura, her, the town they used to live in, and just his past in general. Basically calling him a coward, saying that he will just run away from his problems and his past for the rest of his life. Which, to be fair, is the exact thing that Kasuga has been doing these past 3 years, running away from his past. He has attempted to forget about everything to do with Nakamura and everything that the two did together, with him attempting to be normal and go completely against the whole other side concept and being different in that worldview and society view that Nakamura had. But of course, we see Kasuga just struggle with this so much through the course of Act 2 of the story. Saki then tells Kasuga that she feels let down and disappointed. Saki was hoping that Kasuga had changed, become someone better than who he was before. Saki deep down still loves Kasuga. Sure, it definitely doesn't seem like it here, but she does. That's why she decides to exchange numbers with him in the first place, and that's why she dresses up all super nice, like she's going on a date with her own boyfriend. And I mean, her boyfriend looked exactly like a younger version of Kasuga, with Aya even mentioning and pointing this out to Kasuga himself. So I think Saki was fully willing to and hoping that if Kasuga changed, she was like gonna, go back to him, but he didn't change, so she just ended up being disappointed. Saki simply leaves with Kasuga just starting to bawl his eyes out because he knows deep down everything that Saki said about him was true. A couple days go by with Aya and Koji making up again, as they had been ignoring each other for a couple days since their fight at the get-together. Kasuga goes with Aya to the coffee shop that her and Koji work at, with Koji apologizing to Kasuga and talking about how he's gonna change for the better for Aya's sake because he just loves her that much. And this is where we see Kasuga's feelings for Aya really start to show and form. Because the thing with Kasuga that has been a reoccurring pattern in this series, except for Saki, is the fact that he can just never really admit his feelings for a girl, or when he does have feelings for a girl, he just can't really admit it to himself. When Aya tells Kasuga about her and Koji making up, the only thing on his mind is her. We eventually end up getting to Christmas, where we see Kasuga just wandering around. Of course, the only thing on his mind is Aya. He cannot stop thinking about Aya. And out of nowhere, when he's just on this long walk, he starts to see all these weird visions about his past, seeing people like Nakamura, also seeing this weird black figure who tells him that he's a shitbug and that everything that happened to Nakamura, Saki, his parents, it was all his fault. And these visions somehow make him have a huge realization about Aya, how he's just so in love with her. Because as I already mentioned, of course, Kasuga has had feelings for Aya for quite some time, but he never really confronted those feelings or understood them. And at the same time, with him realizing all this stuff about his feelings for Aya, he somehow comes to the conclusion that Aya loves him back, which just sounds absolutely crazy, especially considering how she has a damn boyfriend. But he ends up actually being right, as right after this realization, Kasuga's ballsy enough to just go straight to the cafe that Aya works at and confess his feelings to her right in front of her, in front of the whole cafe, in front of Koji himself, in front of everybody. And everyone just kind of laughs at him, especially Koji, who thinks Kasuga is just playing some kind of prank. Aya tells Kasuga, like, hey, we can talk about this later when I'm on break in private. But Kasuga just keeps being persistent, saying that he's just so in love with her, and he even sticks out his arm to her, with Aya taking a second to really just take in everything that she just heard from Kasuga and decides to just break up with Koji right then and there, also quitting her cafe job on the spot. So she leaves her job and boyfriend behind, aka entering this like new world with Kasuga, this new life, which I feel so bad for Koji. Like, I could give two shits less about this character. Also, he was kind of an asshole, as I mentioned much earlier in the video, but the way that Aya broke up with him was just brutal. And I think what really got Aya to decide on this so quickly, quit her job, break up with Koji, etc., is because of one line that Kasuga said to her, "Let's live." That line holds so much weight because Kasuga, even though he didn't understand his feelings at the time, he was suppressing them. And Aya was doing the exact same thing with her feelings for Kasuga. So just him saying that line to her made her realize that, yeah, this guy's the one for me. So these two have finally gotten together. The romantic tension between these two has been killing me. Kasuga and Aya are just so happy and in love with each other. And of course, the relationship only gets stronger with time, with Kasuga's life just being great. But there's still one thing that Kasuga has to do, which is face his past. And what finally gets him to return to his old little mundane town and face his past in some capacity is his grandfather's death. Kasuga's grandfather dies out of nowhere, and because of this, Kasuga's mom, dad, and himself, of course, all have to go back to their town and attend the funeral. Kasuga runs into many old faces and has to face many people there. His family, the townspeople. He even sees Ai again, Saki's best friend. Which, instead of condemning Kasuga, Ai actually asks him to get dinner with her. And the reason she does this is because she wants to ask him if he knows anything about Saki, as Saki completely disappeared without telling Ai anything. Kasuga tells her everything that he knows, and in exchange, Kasuga learns about Nakamura, with Ai somehow knowing about where Nakamura currently is. And this completely changes everything for Kasuga, because up until now, Kasuga has had no choice but to really run away from his past, to forget Nakamura. And of course, that's what he's been trying to do for the entirety of Act 2. But now he can go confront her about everything. He can finally get the answers that he's been looking for. After Ai gives Kasuga this information about Nakamura, she says goodbye and leaves, which this small interaction made me like Ai so much more as a character. And I really like that we saw her again, because I personally didn't think that she would show up in Act 2 at all. She wasn't super duper important in Act 1, but I'm so glad we got to see her in Act 2. Kasuga ends up leaving his hometown soon after, and he actually decides to not go see Nakamura at first, because he has this new life now. A great new girlfriend, new friends, and he's just living. And at first, it's easy for Kasuga to really stick with this decision, but what ends up changing his mind is actually Aya finishing her novel, with Aya's main motivation for writing her book being for Kasuga to read it. And as I already mentioned, the first real meaningful thing in Kasuga's life is wanting to read Aya's book, helping her with her book. So this book just means so much to these two. And when Aya finally gives Kasuga the finished product, asking him to read it, he realizes that he can't. He then decides to tell Aya everything about his past, everything that happened with Nakamura, everything he did. And he does this because he realizes that he needs to confront his past, confront Nakamura, and finally get some closure in his life. Because these past 3 years, Kasuga has been suffering with who he really is as a person, suppressing his feelings for Nakamura in the process. And even though he has this whole entire new life now, as I mentioned before, Nakamura and his past in general is always still on his mind. No matter what he does, this girl is still always on his mind all the time. And to him, it would just feel wrong to read Aya's book right now, kind of like an insult to her. So when Kasuga finally decides to read it eventually, it's like opening a new chapter in his life, which of course he just isn't ready to do yet until he confronts certain things about him and his past. And Aya, hearing all this, just goes batshit crazy, completely ripping up her story and running away from Kasuga, which is fair considering everything Kasuga just told her. Kasuga stops her, they talk things out, which eventually leads to them kissing. And Aya just decides that she'll go with Kasuga to meet Nakamura. That way, Aya can feel some comfort with this whole entire situation, and Kasuga can get what he wants with him being able to finally confront Nakamura after all this time. So it's a win-win for the both of them anyway. So the two travel to go find Nakamura, and they end up finding her in a eatery in a very small town. This eatery is run by Nakamura's mom. When Kasuga and Aya get there, Nakamura isn't there. She's currently out getting supplies for her mother, but she does eventually come back to the eatery and ends up even serving Kasuga and Aya, as Kasuga and Aya are just considered ordinary customers at the end of the day. Nakamura looks completely different from when we last saw her. She has black hair that goes to her shoulder, unlike before where she had a tomboy haircut that was pink. She's also not wearing her glasses, so she's probably just wearing some contacts or something like that. Nakamura serves Aya and Kasuga their food, telling them to enjoy their meal. So with Nakamura saying two very simple words that you would use in everyday conversation, you can already drastically tell that she is completely different from how she used to be. Nakamura walks off after giving them their food, with Kasuga just announcing himself to her, saying that he came to see her, and she simply turns around and says, "Long time no see." So once again, this just seems like a completely different character. She is acting very friendly, and she even seems a little charismatic. Kasuga and Nakamura lock eyes for a bit, then she just walks off again. Nakamura's mom steps in, realizing that Kasuga is the boy from Nakamura's past and was the reason that Nakamura's life got so messed up and that she had to move in with her in the first place. So she decides to ask Kasuga to just leave because Nakamura and her mom have a very peaceful life and she doesn't want it to be disturbed. But Aya, being the goat that she is, steps in mid-conversation and is like, "Hey, can we just have a small conversation or even just a word with Nakamura?" And even like calls out to her saying, "Hey, can we just talk to you?" And Nakamura says that she can meet them later that night at a beach close to the eatery. So they meet up later that night and Kasuga just cuts right to the chase, asking Nakamura why she pushed him back then. Probably the thing that he has wanted to know the answer to the most out of anything these past 3 years. Nakamura then raises her arm arm in front of Kasuga, with her saying that she simply just doesn't remember. And I think she doesn't remember because I'm pretty sure she's on some kind of pills. In my mind, it's pretty obvious that Nakamura has some kind of mental disorder, and I'm assuming that the pills that she was most likely on probably hinders her memory. That's why she genuinely doesn't remember pushing Kasuga off the stage that night. Kasuga ends up putting his arm in front of Nakamura, with Nakamura and Kasuga both connecting their hands together. Nakamura asks Kasuga if Aya is his girlfriend, and of course he says yes. After hearing this, Nakamura giggles a bit and says good for him. Then her head kind of like tilts back in this very awkward motion, with her eyes rolling into the back of her head, and I don't know what the hell this was. Like I said, with her being most likely on some kind of pills to combat a mental disorder, I'm assuming that it has something to do with this whole entire moment, with this whole awkward motion that she's doing here. Of course, though, I'm not completely sure. But she kind of snaps out of consciousness, and her body kind of goes on like autopilot mode, with her turning around and walking away from Kasuga and Aya. Kasuga is used to this kind of treatment from Nakamura. We have seen this happen many times in the story. And how he would always deal with this kind of treatment from her is by just latching onto her, which is what he does here. This time, though, after latching onto her, he just throws her onto the ground. He throws her around a couple more times until he starts just crying. But this isn't tears of sadness, it's tears of joy. With Kasuga saying he's so happy that Nakamura hasn't disappeared. Nakamura then strikes back by punching Kasuga and shoving him to the ground. Aya then tries to stop these two, but Kasuga simply pulls her to the ground as well, with the three of them wrestling like a bunch of 5-year-old kids, having an absolute blast in the process. A couple hours go by, with it now being dark. Kasuga, Aya, and Nakamura all lie around each other in a circle, just exhausted, staring up at the stars, when Nakamura looks at Kasuga and says, "Don't ever come back, you normal man." Kasuga thanks Nakamura, with Kasuga finally getting the closure that he needed. Kasuga has always struggled with one major thing in his life: his identity. He's never truly been content with who he is as a person, or really even understood or known who he was in the first place. When we first meet him, he's a nerd, an outcast. Sure, he has friends at the start of the story, but he thinks he's different from everyone else. So when he meets Nakamura, another person who is also a outcast just like him, he relates to her in just such a way that he has never related to anyone else before. And eventually, of course, takes on Nakamura's crazy ideas, perspectives, and worldview. And of course, Kasuga basically just became exactly like Nakamura. Going into Act 2, after everything that he experienced with Nakamura, Kasuga is just completely empty. Kasuga tries to be normal. He tries to live a normal life as a normal kid and forget about his past and who he used to be. And he does technically do that in a sense, but he never truly converted to this new identity. He always had like a battle within himself for who he truly was, trying to be this normal person or trying to be the person that he was with Nakamura. Two very conflicting and opposite identities, you could say, which of course leads us to now where we see Nakamura say to Kasuga like, "Hey, you're a normal person. You're not like me at all." Basically, in a sense, being like, hey, you moved on and found a new identity, and that is completely okay. And for the first time in the story with Nakamura basically identifying what he is now, he gets that closure and he's content and just knows who he is as a person now. And that's why he thanks Nakamura, because now he can finally move on with his life. After Nakamura calls Kasuga a normal man, we then see another time skip, where Kasuga is in college studying literature with Aya right by his side. They get married, have kids, and Aya even becomes a best-selling author, inspiring Kasuga to write his own stories and novels. Kasuga's conclusion is him starting to write his own Flowers of Evil, aka his own story. We also see conclusions for the other main characters, of course. Nakamura seems to be doing well, having matured and reuniting with her dad, which I think is a great conclusion for her character, because she is finally coming to accept herself and the world that she lives in. And by seeing her dad again, it shows us that Nakamura is no longer afraid of others, the world that she lives in, and she's no longer trying to constantly escape it. Saki has kids of her own, with Ai also reuniting with Saki, and that's really the end of the story. We do get an extra chapter that I do want to just just quickly touch on chapter 57, which actually shows us the first chapter of the story, but from Nakamura's point of view, showing us how Nakamura sees other people as these like black creatures, showing us her isolation and how she's actually afraid of others because she actually sees them as these like shitty bugs, referencing why she calls people shit bugs all the time in the first act of the story. Also, this chapter really adds a whole new layer of her character, along with helping us finally understand her and her perspective even more. Aku no Hana is quite easily the best coming of age story that I have personally ever seen. This story is very strange for sure, like there's no denying that, but through its strangeness, it portrays the painful struggle of finding identity and the search for authentic connections with others through the mist of monotony, mundane society.